I am near the end of my bracelet, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up the couple of squares that I have left here. I strung on 6 beads, and I just brought it through the side, and I'm going to do it the last square, and then we'll start embellishing the band. Again, I've just strung 6 seed beads, and I'm finishing up this last square. I'm going to bring it up over here. And then I'll be able to show you how to embellish in between the little squares. And as you can see, as you go along, as you went along and made the band, that it became more of a square. And one little tip that I do have is this little square right here in the center or the joint of your squares. You can always tell if you've made a mistake because you'll be able to see a thread come directly across here, and you're not supposed to have that, so you should have just a nice clean open square there, and that way you know that you've run your thread through the correct way. Now, what we're going to do to embellish the squares is you want to have your thread coming out of this last square added, which I do. It's right here on the corner. So I'm going to string a seed bead, a 4mm round, and then a seed bead. And all we're going to do is we're going to work this diagonally across the square. So I'm going to take my needle and run it through the bottom 3 seed beads of the square. Until you see something like this. And then again, we're at the diagonal of the square, and all we're going to do now is pick up another seed bead, another 4mm round, another seed bead, go through those bottom 3, and you're just going to work down the side of the bracelet. Then you'll come back up the middle and then back down the other side. So you just want to work on a diagonal and going through those bottom 3 seed beads. Until you've completely embellished your bracelet. And if you don't want to embellish every square, you may skip every other one. You would just need to weave your thread through the squares until you get it to this position of the corner. When you start the second row, again, you want to reposition your thread so you have it on the corner of each square. Okay, now that I've got the bracelet just about complete on the embellishment, and I'm going to finish this last part, and then what we'll do is we're going to do a little square stitch on the ends so that we have something to tie our button for our closure to. Now here at the very end, I'm going to just count the last 3 beads here. That's my top row. They kind of all start to blend together. And when and if you are going to have to add threads, in this case, instead of half hitching through the work, just run your threads through several beads in a zigzag pattern and leave a tail, and then continue stitching, and then cut your tails off later on. When I completed my embellishment, I was out of these 3 seed beads on the last row here. And so what now we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to fill in with the seed bead these 2 little gaps, because we're going to do a little square stitch, 2 rows of square stitch for the end panel. So I'm just going to pick up a seed bead to fill in. I'm going to run it through the middle row of 3. And pick up another seed bead. Till I come out the end here. And sometimes your fire line gets a little knotted and you just need to pull it out, pull it forward, get that knot out. Okay, now I have filled in the line here so that I can make 2 rows of square stitch. And what you do on a square stitch what we're going to do is we're going to pick up a seed bead, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to run my needle back through this first seed bead, okay, now once you've pulled it through, this seed bead sits on top of that first seed bead, and then I'm going to run my needle through that one that I just strung, tighten it, and I'm going to pick up another seed bead. I'm going to come in and through the second, run my needle through. Okay, I got it through that bead, and then I'm going to go back through it the other side again, and we're just going to continue this down the line until we've made 2 rows of this square stitch. So we're just going to pick up a seed bead, run it through, and what you're doing is you're reinforcing the square stitch. You're just making a square with your stitching through the bead. And if you want this to be wider or thicker, if you needed it for the length, then you could do 3 rows. In my case, I just need to do 2 rows. And as you can see, each one of these beads sits on top of the other. Now that I've got the 2 rows square stitched to that last row, you can see the little panel that we have here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to attach my button, which is going to be my closure. So I'm just going to bring my needle through a couple of seed beads to where I think is just about the middle. Because all we're going to do is sew this button on to the panel. And I'm going to go ahead and bring it through one more. So what we're going to do is, you can see I'm using a shank button. All I'm going to do is thread the shank button on to the thread. And then I'm just going to go back through, since I couldn't get back through that bead, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run it through a couple of these beads here, out the end, up through the top, and then I'm going to reinforce it by stitching it up and down through the shank. Okay, so all we're going to do is just simply reinforce this button, and I'm just sewing through the bracelet to catch some of those threads. You don't have to sew it up through the seed beads every time. I did at least twice to get it caught and positioned, and now I'm just going to sew it just like as you would be sewing a button. Just want it to have, have several passes through there so it's nice and tight. And then to tie off your thread, you're just going to make some half hitch notches within that panel to tie it off, and then we will create the loop that will catch the button. Okay, I went ahead and did the end panel here. Again, I did two rows of square stitch, and I've repositioned my thread till about middle way of the panel. And I've strung on 18 seed beads, and all I did was just string on some seed beads, check it to see if it would fit over the loop of the button, and that's where I'm ending. And then all I'm going to do is take my needle back through a few of the seed beads on the end to create the loop. And all we're going to do is just run my needle back through the panel a couple of times, half hitch knot, and you'll be complete with your bracelet.